emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 524.JB4114, certificate number 35120. George Washington's teeth.
Here he comes.
Here comes the general.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Here comes the general.
The moment you've been waiting for.
Here comes the general.
The pride of Mount Vernon.
Here comes the general.
George Washington.
Now, what do you think of when you think of George Washington's teeth?
I know one of the gotchas here is that 99% of people will say they're made of wood.
Right.
And I know one little turns out, which is that there's actually no evidence that he had wooden teeth.
No wood.
But yeah, that's why he never, the father of our country, and he didn't have any wood, so-called.
Oof. No progeny.
No progeny. That's true. He had his wife's kids from a previous marriage, and that's it, right?
Yeah. Mount Vernon was inherited by nephews and various others.
But that's not related to his lack of wood.
Well, we don't know that for sure, but it is not related to a lack of wood in his teeth.
In his mouth.
Probably. The reason that that the legend that he had wooden teeth came about was that he liked to drink red wine. And so...
Oh, yeah. So say no more. I get it.
Red wine turns teeth to wood.
Because he liked to drink red wine, we often think he had wooden teeth.
That's right.
It makes perfect sense.
You took logic as well as I did in college. You know how rhetoric works.
When I see somebody... John Rhetoric? When I see somebody drinking red wine, I immediately think, hey, are those wooden teeth?
Whatever your teeth are made of, they are stained, presumably, particularly if they are not your own teeth, if they're not living teeth. If the enamel or whatever constitutes those teeth, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
What if you're not using Topol, the smoker's tooth polish?
If you're not using Topol, the smoker's tooth polish, it's another like chink in your armor. But your teeth will gradually become stained, and particularly if they're made out of organic material of any kind, for instance, ivory or walrus penis bone.
Even human teeth.
Stain with stain. And Madeira wine or port are particularly stainy.
And was he drinking
wines.
A lot of fortified wines?
He was.
Did he have a big thing of Thunderbird?
Well, that and
Vernon?
Also Old English 800. He was a big fan of malt liquor. But he did drink wine that stained his teeth. And it's funny, George Washington, there's a lot of tragedy in this story.
Oh. Can we have fun now?
Some tragedy greater than other, as we will see. But yeah, we can have a good old time laughing at
you tell me when
George Washington's
do a different face when the serious turn is going to come.
I'll use my naval signaling flags here to I'll raise up the flag
because we don't have music cues on this show.
Laughing.
We don't have the dun dun like it's behind the music.
We should, right? We should get some like documentary film serious strings to indicate changes of mood.
Just to temp track the show.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of Topol, the smoker's tooth polish.
Yes.
I learned the other day whatever happened to Pepsodent.
Oh, what did happen to Pepsodent?
Pepsodent famously would make you wonder where the yellow went.
Right.
It was good at stained teeth, I guess.
It was good at stained dentures.
Oh, is that what people
Pepsodent was a denture cleaner.
No, I think it was toothpaste also. Are you thinking of...
maybe later.
You're thinking of Effordent? No, wait.
So
Isn't there Efferdent or something like that you put in that makes your denture cup fizz? What is that?
Yeah, let's see.
Efferdent is like Alka-Seltzer, but for your dentures.
Oh, Pepsodent is a toothpaste. You're absolutely right.
It's like a 50th toothpaste. And I always wonder whatever happened to Pepsodent. And here's what happened to Pepsodent. They were very resistant to putting fluoride in it.
Oh, really?
So long after all the other manufacturers had put out their fluoride toothpastes, which was like, I think, a 50s innovation.
Yeah.
They just were like, nope, baking soda. We're going to stick with that. That's the horse that brung us here.
Well, it seems like a lot of people that don't like fluoride in their drinking water would have been very supportive of that.
Yeah, it turns out there's not enough conspiracy wackos to keep Pepsodent on the shelves.
It's Polydent.
Oh, Polydent.
That was the denture cleaner as
Is that Martha Ray?
as pitched by Martha Ray.
Yeah.
That's right. Polydent, where you take your dentures out and put them in a cleaning solution.
Because I've seen so many denture commercials. Do you know why?
Why?
I-
Right, because you're on Jeopardy.
I love game shows so much. So even as a kid, just watching reruns of Name That Tune or something during the day, I would see an endless stream of denture adhesive and denture cleaning commercials. Plus my grandma had her teeth in a jar. Have you had relatives that would put their teeth in a cup at night?
My dad had partial dentures, and as he got older, his partial dentures became a greater portion of his teeth.
And then his head, they metastasized into his brain.
Right. And so there, as in his later years, I'm talking about in his 80s, you could surprise him and find that some of his teeth were out, and he'd have to reach for them and put them in. Until the mid 20th century, pulling all your teeth was a strategy, like a health strategy. A lot of people.
What's the upside? Make me the case, John, that I should pull out all my teeth today.
Well,
because I got some time after this.
Infections in your teeth in a pre-fluoride universe jeopardized your health and well-being.
That's my favorite movie universe, by the way.
I
love the PFU.
Pre-fluoride universe. Who were the superheroes of the pre-fluoride universe?
Well, they all smell terrible, but that's why it's really good in movie form.
Really bad breath. Halitosis was the kind of the king of that universe. But in a time when you had a lot of sugar in food and not a lot of fluoride, cavities and infection could low-level infection can create just kind of malaise and sickness in the body, and teeth in a time when you just couldn't prevent tooth decay. Dentists and doctors recommended that you pull your teeth.
Like cutting off a gangrenous toe or something.
Yeah, but not even the unhealthy teeth. That you just pull all your teeth.
Why wouldn't you just pull the bad ones? Is it because it's harder to make a partial bridge than a...
That, and also teeth were, for a certain period of time, when denture technology arrived, complete enough that you could have comfortable dentures. There have been dentures for a long time, hundreds of years.
Well, back to colonial times, evidently, given the topic of our show.
That's right, but comfortable dentures that you could use Polygrip and wear all day and eat apples with.
How comfortable are dentures?
I don't think that comfortable.
That's the impression I get even today.
But a denture that's built around a kind of a material that is a cup for your gums, like an even cup, rather than, as we'll see, the brass torture apparatus that old dentures were made of, where you could really use them as teeth. People of the generation immediately before my mom, I think a lot of her grandparents had all their teeth pulled. And I mentioned this on Twitter a few weeks ago and heard from a lot of people that they had all their teeth pulled or had to, people that are on Twitter, not 90-year-olds, but that this was common enough practice until our lifetimes.
So these are not even boomers? These are like...
Yeah, boomers. I feel like by Generation X era, fluoride was in all the drinking water and in all the toothpaste.
And it changed our brains and made us not want to tear out our teeth.
But also...
That's a government conspiracy.
If you had jaw cancer, there are a lot of reasons that you would end up not having any teeth. But I think enough people replied to me saying that they had had a dentist recommend that they have all their teeth pulled, and they demurred.
Whoa.
Meant that it was still commonplace. But in the Martha Ray era of denture treatment products were on regular primetime television commercials.
A common commercial aimed at an older audience.
Yeah, speaks to the fact that full dentures were fairly commonplace, and that's a result of this strategy, right? Or just a common practice, like your teeth, they're only going to cause you problems.
Maybe it'll come back through crystal meth. Maybe we will get back to a place where a whole generation of people decide to take them all out at once.
I have a few root canals, and the last time I was at the dentist, there was an X-ray that showed that one of the root canals, which I had done 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, right at the very end of the root of one of the teeth, had not been fully extracted. And there was what the dentist identified as a tiny little infection all the way up there that had been there infected.
And now covered in whatever weird polymer they put on top of it.
And the suggestion was that having had this low-level infection somewhere up in my head for all these many years, that it had been affecting my overall health, that it's potentially the result or potentially the source of all my malaise. Potentially it's why I have never been able to maintain a relationship.
Do you think it's made your podcasting better or worse?
I can't tell.
Maybe it's made your songwriting better, but your podcasting worse.
I want you to imagine me if I didn't have a tiny low-level infection in my teeth.
It's just like you, but the guy did a better job on your root canal 30 years ago.
Right, but no difference in my personality? Nothing more I'm not more convivial or maybe more punctual?
It's hard to imagine that something at the, below your gum line is actually affecting your bodily systems, organs away. But I guess that can happen, right?
I thought you were going to say it's hard to imagine that I could be any improved.
Right. I can't imagine a livelier, healthier version of you. So no, I don't want to risk any change at all.
Well, George Washington was...
Hold on. Who?
George Washington, father of our country. What did I say?
No, I need you to walk me through. You can't just mention somebody and not introduce him. Who's George Washington?
George Washington, the father of our country, first president, leader of the revolutionary armies who liberated us from the tyrannical control of Great Britain.
A mythical figure for Americans because he's not just the military symbol of independence, but also then a symbol of virtue, who ruled wisely and then returned to his farm.
That's right.
In a manner then unknown in Europe.
Perhaps the greatest thing that Washington accomplished in his lifetime of legendary exploits
of cherry tree chopping and whatnot
was to, after 2 terms of president, surrender the presidency and refuse to accept a lifelong appointment, even though encouraged by everyone,
literally unanimously being begged to be president forever.
And he said, "Not in my lifetime."
He said, "No way."
Established a precedent that keeps dictators out of the big chair, and that's if he did nothing else. Well, if he did nothing else, he wouldn't have been the first president. But
unless they had some kind of lottery.
But having done all the things that made him the first president, I mean, that's truly his most heroic gesture.
It's definitely inspiring to me that I can accomplish something just by quitting. Like if somebody asks me to do something and I say, no, I would like to return to my farm and not do that, then I can be a
George Washington or Cincinnatus level hero.
It seems to me that the thing you're asked to do most often is to be on people's pub trivia teams. Is that true? How many of those requests do you get in a typical week? Hey, Ken!
Well, it's gotten worse lately, because normally people know I'm not going to show up at their college campus or bar or be on their team. Although people will be like, hey, Ken, if you want to come to Mulligan's at 8:30 tonight in Annapolis.
Right. Sort of like people want Bill Murray to show up at their wedding and make mixed drinks.
And be fun. But in the time of the cholera now, all these trivia nights are going virtual. And so people really do think maybe he will come and show up on Zoom.
Sure. Well, why don't you do it sometime?
Here's the thing.
Let's do it as a gag.
I should prefer not to. Do you know how good that would have to be better than not having a thing on my list of things to do tonight?
I mean, the worst part would be to show up and get schooled by some like craft brewing, swilt wearing beardo somewhere.
There's almost no outcome. If I show up and I'm really good,
You're just a bummer.
Nobody likes that.
Yeah.
And if I show up and I'm really bad, then no one likes that either.
Yeah, no.
So I don't know what to do. Stay home like George Washington did. Go groom your horse.
Well, George Washington was not bad at taking care of his teeth. Is
that true?
He really, really, George Washington's teeth were a source of tremendous pain and agonizing and physical pain for him his entire life.
To whom? To him?
To whom and to him.
And to Martha.
Martha figures in a minute. George Washington lost his first tooth at the age of 24 years old.
That's like 10 years after I lost my first tooth.
Yeah, well, you got your first tooth knocked out, right? His first tooth fell out.
Oh, no, I'm talking about my baby teeth.
Oh, your baby
Oh, I see. He lost an adult tooth at 24 just from rotting out of his head?
Well, yeah, and there's some suggestion that at the time, mercury oxide was being used to treat a variety of ailments. It was kind of briefly a miracle drug. Like,
that's bad?
Yeah, huff some mercury and see how it helps your gout. And so, we're talking about the mid 1700s, and during this period, for treating a variety of ailments, he may have been prescribed mercury oxide, which would, among other many things that mercury can do to a person, may have started the process of his teeth falling out.
Well, if they keep dismantling the EPA, we're all going to find out what happens.
That's right.
When we all just are drinking a ton of mercury.
Well,
all the time.
I've got mercury popsicles in the freezer. Can't wait to get to
a nice cool glass of mercury at the end of the day.
He carried around a whole kit of tooth cleaning, baking soda, and brushes and little instruments.
What a nerd!
He was a nerd, but it didn't help. By the time of his inauguration in 1789, he had one tooth left in his head. And
a lot of people just have bad tooth genes.
Yeah, and that's right. And
my son has never brushed his teeth once. I don't think I've ever seen him brush his teeth. And he never gets cavities.
That jerk.
I hate it.
Yeah. There are people like that. I mean, the Jesse Sykes, local Seattle rock gal, personal muse of mine. She has perfect teeth. She's 50 years old and
But she never takes care of them.
Never had a cat. Oh, I'm sure she takes care of them. But I took care of my teeth, and I mean, I kept getting them knocked out in fistfights.
The dentists always act like it's virtue.
Yeah.
Like, we can actually measure on a scale of 1 to 100 how good a person you are by how long it takes us to scrape this tartar. But or how many cavities you have. But that's not true.
A dental assistant lecture me not very long ago on like what to do, like how to brush my teeth. I was like, lady, I'm 50 years old. Do you know how many times I've been taught to brush my teeth? And you, this 28-year-old, is going to explain to me how to brush my teeth? And I took my little bib off and I threw it on the ground and I got up and I said, this is outrageous. Stomped out. And never went back.
You should have kept the bib.
And now and I grabbed 2 free toothbrushes and a bunch of floss.
You were in the middle of a filling. You're like, this is outrageous. I'm not coming back.
None of that actually happened. Although she did lecture me about toothbrushing. But George Washington had dentures made. And dentures made in the style of the time. He had quite a few. There are three dentists that play a role in George Washington's lives. The three dentists of George Washington,
And they're by transitive property the dentists of America.
they are America's dentists. Although one of them is French, of course, like all Americans, like all American greats, one of them has to be French.
Because we're a melting pot.
We are a melting pot that's basically made up of Americans and 1 tablespoon of French.
That's how you get Louisiana. It doesn't explain the rest of the country.
His first tooth was pulled by a dentist by the name of Dr. Watson. We don't know that much more about him.
Well, of all the crimes he solved.
A different Dr. Watson. Oh. This predates that Dr. Watson, and perhaps is the namesake of that Dr. Watson.
You never know.
But his he has 2 somewhat famous dentists, and one of them, the Frenchman, was named Dr. Jean-Pierre Lemeilleur.
I have no idea how to spell that.
And Jean-Pierre, and the spelling of that name, it's not just you that cannot spell it, because his name appears in ledgers at Mount Vernon, spelled a lot of different ways. It seems like someone had a phone cradled on their shoulder and was like, "Say it again, Lemeilleur." How do you? And
it's L as in Le Mans, E as in Eclair,
MEXRUYY.
That'd be funny if George Washington was a terrible speller.
I think everyone was a terrible speller back then because their F's and their S's looked the same.
They were always going to the dentist.
But Lemeilleur, Dr. Lemeilleur, actually was a dentist for the British, and at a certain point in treating his charge there, Sir Henry Clinton, the kind of leader of the British Army in New York, he got so insulted by the way the British mocked the French in their ancient way. They all, they whacked the top of their head and said, "I don't fought in your general direction." He picked up his dental tools and in the middle of the night crossed enemy lines and went to the Americans and said, "I refuse to do the dentistry on the stupid British. Now I'm with you. Americans.
You've got to
Revolution.
You've got to work on people's hearts and minds.
That's right.
And teeth.
And as soon as George Washington hears that I am here across the lines with my French tools."
So he became George Washington's dentist?
George Washington heard about him and sought him out. So his General Washington's dental problems were something that he tried to keep secret because he was embarrassed by them, but also, it was a sign of his frailty, and he didn't want that well known.
It's a lack of potency if you're having teeth pulled.
Well, and also you just don't. I mean, you're out there generaling. You don't want anybody thinking that you have a low-level infection in the root of one of your front teeth.
Do you know what I would? Yeah, that's why you didn't tell me until now.
That's right.
Do you know what I would use if I was working on George Washington's teeth?
Quoi?
General anesthetic.
Oh,
see,
it's
that's
fun. Cute.
It's fun, isn't it?
It is. That's nice
when you think about it.
That's nice. When Washington heard that Dr. Lemeilleur had crossed over the lines, he sought him out and made him his personal dentist and eventually lifelong friend.
Oh,
yeah.
I've never hung out with a single healthcare professional.
Dentists?
No.
There was a while, my dad, all the professional people in his life were his friends. His cardiologist, his dentist, his doctor, his insurance agent.
I think that's a problem.
It's just the way it used to be. So, small town America.
Your gynecologist?
Yeah. Your mom's gynecologist.
You're going to go get drinks with your mom's OBGYN?
Washington's tooth problems actually figure into an important moment in American history. Washington sent a letter complaining about his teeth and asking that his tooth equipment, his dental equipment, be brought to him in the field, and it was included in a packet of different communications sent via runner, and the runner was captured. And this packet of war plans, along with Washington's dental needs, was captured was taken to Henry Clinton, and it was the letter about his teeth that convinced Clinton that the rest of the stuff in the packet was authentic and not a diversion.
Like a fake
It wasn't
espionage move.
Right. So in the letter or in the packet, there are other letters from Washington saying, we're not going to head south to Philadelphia. We're going to, the armies are going to remain here in the vicinity of New York, et cetera, et cetera. And so Clinton did not bother or thought it rather unwise to reinforce Cornwallis. And in the meantime, between the time the packet was sent and the events of the day, Washington had decided to turn his attention to Yorktown. And so when he arrived at Yorktown, Cornwallis was not reinforced by Clinton.
That's the turning point of the revolution.
It really is.
We'd all be speaking English right now if not for Yorktown.
And if not for George Washington's tooth problems.
And this was not, in fact, a ploy. He just happened to change his mind, not knowing the packet had been diverted, had been intercepted.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah. An interesting little moment in American history.
And the lesson really is change your mind about stuff. Keep them guessing.
Keep them guessing. Well, the lesson is send out a bunch of letters to people that full of falsehoods.
Send out a bunch of emails every day and forget what you said.
Yes, of course I'll be on your trivia team. Absolument. Another one of his, I guess the remaining of the troika of dentists in George Washington's life was a man by the name of John Greenwood, who was, dentist to the stars.
And he was in Radiohead.
He was a great guitar player. Junk, junk. He was like, I need some teeth. Junk, junk, junk. I'm a tooth. John Greenwood was responsible for making George Washington's dentures. And we know that George Washington had at least 4 complete sets of dentures.
Not at the same time.
Not at the same time. No, he was like the mother in the Aliens movie. He had dentures and he opened his mouth and then the other dentures.
A little tiny bit of dentures come out.
Another denture.
And they give his farewell address.
And John Greenwood was working with the technology available at the time in manufacturing these dentures. And he was using the dentures, when you look at them, are really a contraption. They're made of brass. And they have gold, and there are little springs that help.
That's what keeps it in?
Yeah, that help open it, and there's bolts, and there are.
Right, because if it doesn't stick to the gum.
Right, it's got to open and close according to some mechanism. And so they're
It'd be like having the worst headgear in 4th grade.
Yeah, but also one that's like, when it closes, I'm sure it goes clack.
Is George Washington a cyborg?
He's the first.
He was the first cyborg.
He's the first human human-robot relations.
That's why we put him on the $1 bill, because he's the first cyborg. We need to honor the future.
If you look at I think the early dentures had hippo teeth.
Wait, why?
Bone, animal teeth, as well as ivory carved to be like teeth. They were really a collection of found objects.
It's an assemblage, if you will, in the mouth. It's a Robert Rauschenberg piece.
But also including some human teeth.
Mixed in?
Mixed
like
in.
For the back, they'll use hippo teeth, but in the front...
So duplicating the appearance and shape and utility of a human tooth is not easy to do in taking teeth from other beasts.
Right.
Like there aren't any really, you couldn't just put a horse tooth in there. That would be kind of funky.
Have they thought about monkeys?
There weren't a ton of monkeys in colonial America.
Well, I hate to break this to you, but there weren't a ton of hippos either. Pablo Escobar having not yet been invented.
But if you take one hippo tooth and work it down, you could probably get 4 human teeth out of it.
Yeah, maybe they just scrimshawed the whole thing out of one walrus tusk.
Yeah, I think it was a lot more common to find ivory in colonial America. I mean, that's the whole reason that the island of Nantucket was built there by God.
And for the limericks. And for the hilarious limericks. What are What are dentures made out of today? I just realized I don't know.
Oh,
I'm guessing it was porcelain for a long time.
porcelain and Bakelite and
then today it's probably some synthetic.
Yeah, right. It's made out of it's made out of angel tears, like everything.
Really?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Doesn't the FDA regulate that?
I think the internet is made out of angel tears. At least my interactions with it are. But the dentures, as you can imagine, were incredibly uncomfortable. But the procurement of human teeth, there was actually a market for teeth.
Is this like from cadavers?
No.
Uh-oh.
There were advertisements placed in newspapers, including advertisements placed by Dr. Jean-Pierre Lemaire.
Misconnections.
That's right. You.
Standing on the
Have some teeth.
on the
Me.
handsome cab with lovely teeth.
Have no teeth.
Me, a toothless guy looking longingly at your teeth. Please write.
The going rate for teeth was 2 guineas per tooth.
So it's over 2 pounds. So I'm sure that's hundreds of dollars.
A lot of money.
More?
And I feel like to be willing to have your front tooth pulled in exchange for more than 2 pounds speaks to both the value of the tooth and also the relative social value of having all your teeth. I guess in a world where everybody was losing their teeth, to have a good one and pull it out for money seemed like maybe it was an option if you were a poor person.
Yeah, I mean, if you're very desperate and you have a way to get hundreds of dollars, I guess you do it. It's like locks of love, except it won't grow back.
Now, we can't say for sure, we can't speak about all of George Washington's dentures because only one set has survived to this day. There's a partial that's, I think, kept at the American Dental Museum or whatever, but there is a complete set of George Washington's teeth that is at Mount Vernon. Mount Vernon, which is owned and operated by the Mount Vernon Ladies Association.
I've never been. Have you ever been to see the MVLA's work?
No, I've only seen it from my paddle wheel steamer in plying the Potomac. You know, the story of Mount Vernon is interesting. It remained in the Washington family, as I say, owned by various nephews and whatnot, until the mid-1800s, and it had fallen into disrepair. George Washington's descendants didn't have the money to keep the enormous estate up. And at one point, a Southern belle by the name of Louise Dalton Bird Cunningham, Louise Dalton Bird Cunningham was I'm sure fanning herself on the deck of a paddle wheel steamer and saw the disrepair that Mount Vernon had fallen unto.
It was not a tourist attraction at all.
Nope, still a private home. And she wrote a letter to a friend decrying its fate, and also perhaps its faith.
Who knows?
But she, wrote to a friend and said, if the men of our country cannot protect and preserve this grand home that plays such a large role in the founding of our nation, perhaps we women should take charge of the moment and raise the funds to buy and protect this noble home.
So once again, once the men flake out at something.
That's right. The Lilith arrives, in this case, in the form of a South Carolina plantation wife. But she mounts a national campaign, and this is in the era leading right up to the Civil War.
She is a Lilith. She mounts something. She
does. She kills 100 demon children an hour. But she raises the money, and they buy Mount Vernon. The Mount Vernon Ladies Association buys Mount Vernon from the last Washington.
And you said this is during the Civil War?
Just prior.
Oh, okay. So eventually it's going to be, these are going to be like Confederate wives,
They all are, right? Although it was a national campaign, right? In 1858, there were 30 states in the United States?
That seems right, about right.
And so it was I think presented as a uniting, like in these times of trouble when we cannot agree on whether or not to own a living being, or on the other hand, to not. Why can we not all get together and support this plan to buy and restore Mount Vernon,
Think of all we have in common.
Virginia?
We all agree there is a correct number
Yeah,
of human beings to own.
correct.
Some say 0, some say a larger number. This is all that divides us.
I love how your Southern accent sounds kind of like the Kennedys.
That's as far south as I go.
I like it.
I don't go further south than Hyannisport.
Well, anyway, they do buy Mount Vernon, and then the Civil War descends upon the world, and Mount Vernon sits kind of decaying through the war. But afterwards, they restore it and spend a lot of money finding all of the Washington effects and figuring out what furniture that's there dates from George Washington's life. And they've become an institution. They just recently spent millions of dollars to buy George Washington's personal copy of the Constitution, and they have his dentures.
So this organization is now in its 160th year or whatever of running Mount Vernon.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
Mount
great.
Vernon Ladies Association.
Well, I should go. It's like 20 minutes from D.C. Why have I not been?
It's just right there. Yeah. And I've never been either. You know what? I've never been to Arlington. And it seems like that's an incredible oversight on my part. It's just, you can see it from
Isn't
the
Arlington related? Like, because the Custis family that owned, isn't Martha Washington's family also Robert E. Lee's wife's family?
Yes.
I think many years later, which means it was the Custis family that donated the land that became Arlington Cemetery when it used to be Lee's back 40.
They are, if not proximate, then
Cousins or something.
Neighbors,
Yeah.
right? But at Mount Vernon, there are also George Washington's ledgers. And in his ledgers, there's one notation that mentions paying some of George Washington's slaves for 9 teeth. And sending those 9 teeth to Dr. Jean-Pierre Lamarille. Those 9 teeth on the open market were worth 19 pounds.
Are you saying he did not pay market rate?
He paid 6 pounds
Oh, come on.
to the slaves, presumably, for their teeth. There is no direct evidence that the human teeth in George Washington's dentures, which comprise a portion of the teeth that are also made of, some of them ivory and some of them buffalo teeth and Usix and
Zebra ivory.
but some of them the real human teeth. There's no direct evidence connecting those teeth to the 9 teeth that George Washington's that the cousin who was managing Mount Vernon at the time sold to Dr. LeMahieu.
We don't know how many slave teeth were in George Washington's mouth when he gave any particular speech.
That's right.
But the number might be more than 0.
The number is anywhere between 0 and 9 of his own slaves' teeth that he underpaid for to have put into his dentures. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's because it's kind of a fun patriotic footnote of American history that George Washington had uncomfortable false teeth.
Yes.
But I guess like so many other fun American history sidebars, it's really only fun if you're willing to ignore some underbelly.
Yeah, and George Washington, we as a nation now are in our 150th year of trying to reckon with the terrible legacy of the 150 years of indentured servitude that preceded the 150 years of reckoning we've had. George Washington passed the Slave Trade Act, which during his tenure as president, which was an attempt to limit the slave trade prior to its to the British abolishment of it. But he also passed the Fugitive Slave Act, the original Fugitive Slave Act, and in his own case worked to throughout his life, even when he was in Philadelphia, which was an abolitionist city, he maintained, he worked the loopholes in order to keep his own slaves in his employ.
Like not just at home in Virginia, but like with him on the road in Philadelphia.
When he died, he owned 317 human beings personally, alive.
And is there any kind of nice asterisk? At least did he
free
them at his death? Or?
He did free them at his death, to the great consternation of the rest of his family and everyone that he knew, because they represented a tremendous portion of his wealth, 317
But
slaves.
still, that's the ultimate NIMBY move, to be like, as long as this conveniences me to own human beings, I will do so.
Right.
The second it no longer benefits me, I will remember my good progressive principles.
Yeah, obviously hard to be there, but the gesture of freeing them was a radical move in his day, but also owning 317 slaves is really not a thing you can...
It's a pretty low bar for...
Can't sweep it under the carpet of history.
Well, I mean, the example of the teeth is... It's a very concrete example of kind of this modern academic thinking theory we have about how the literal bodies of people of color are not respected by the American establishment in any way. Well, and this is a super literal manifestation that, like, to the degree that, like, if our eating is uncomfortable, we'll just chew with their teeth for a while.
To imagine that his inaugural speech was spoken through some number of slave teeth is it's something that we have to consider as part of the...
Like, the metaphor almost couldn't be...
It's really something
better.
Right? A real... There is a perverse poetry to it. And especially considering that as his life continued, his teeth became a source of constant pain, injury, shame, and trauma.
Because they're cursed.
They're cursed teeth. If you look at the Gilbert Stuart painting of George Washington that's on the $1 bill, one of the things about portraits of Washington is that over the course of his life, they really change. And it isn't just a matter of there being different artistic impressions of George Washington. He looks very different from...
The shape of his face changes?
And it is because he has none of his own teeth, the shape of his dentures is determining the shape of his face. And there are lots of letters that he writes to Dr. Greenwood, who's kind of making his dentures and maintaining them, that his dentures protrude. The dentures are too big for his mouth. Sometimes they... they're like this rat trap.
It's funny to imagine a dentist with just a bunch of little trays, like a print assistant, and trying to pick out the elements of just the right shape to fit in this matrix.
And to build this thing out of brass and like bolts. So if you look at the picture on the $1 bill, the Gilbert Stuart portrait, you can see that the shape of Washington's mouth and jaw are... you can see the dentures. You can see that his lower and upper lips are sort of protruding.
It's like Brando in The Godfather.
Yeah, he's got something in his mouth, and every portrait
he's got slavery.
He's got slavery in his mouth.
He ate a little too much slavery,
as well as hippos,
and now it's poking him.
Later and later portraits of Washington, you see him visibly in pain. And if you look at portraits of him in this context, you can see his jaw is clenched. He seems under distress. And it's part of the iconography of the United States.
Yeah, he's solemn.
He's solemn.
But actually, he just has a really bad dental. And dental pain is the worst.
The worst.
It really does interfere with your psyche. And maybe because it's so close to the head, the brain, the organ of thought, that the pain in the mouth is very intense and lifestyle ruining.
Yeah, it's
Again, the metaphor for slavery is still working.
but even more, Washington had a reputation in his own time of being fairly taciturn. He didn't mince words, and he was not overly eloquent. He was not flowery in his language. He didn't go long discursive speeches. He kept
Like throughout his life, or
increasingly, in the style of the time, when his contemporaries were fond of standing up on the table and giving long speeches on the freedom of man and
I've met old people before.
but them, these Revolutionary War deists. I mean, if you think about John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, what their dinner table conversation must have been like.
Oh, sit down, John.
Washington, I know the roots of the tree of liberty. Go on, sure.
Blah blah blah.
Washington just kind of sat quietly, and there's a lot of evidence to the fact that he was so embarrassed by his mouth and so in pain that he just kept his teeth closed. And
I mean, it's such a perfect metaphor for the shames of slavery. It should be a Colson Whitehead novel or something.
It is astonishing. And what's interesting about it is that there was a market for teeth. And in this ledger, they did bother to pay the slaves.
They're not
But they weren't probably...
They're not villains.
Well,
Well, of course we're going to pay for the slave teeth we pulled.
but interesting to think, and this is, again, a thing that where the historical record is silent, or at least it's absent, to imagine what those negotiations were.
I was just trying to picture that.
Are
there volunteers?
If you were going to employ just straight coercion, there wouldn't be all this game of...
I mean, it has to show they weren't really
exchange.
thinking of them as property the way they pretended to, right?
Right.
Like I would not think before pulling batteries out of my remote control to put in my other remote control.
to ask your remote control.
I would not put it
certainly.
in a ledger how much I owe my remote control. Like it things like that do kind of show that maybe at the time it's painted as extra unnecessary benevolence, but it really does show that
But to say
treat them as property was just a charade.
to say to a group of indentured servants, like, "Hey, everyone, line up. So let's get who wants to volunteer? Sell one of your front teeth to the general, and we'll pay you not 2 guineas,
Not the market rate.
not 1 guinea, some number of shillings. I don't know what is 1/3. What's a half of a shilling? I mean, sorry, what's a half of a guinea?
A guinea, I believe, is a pound and a shilling.
Right.
And back then, a pound was
16?
16 shillings.
Is that what it was?
So is it like a third of a person, like
Well,
for census purposes? Like
if you think of the going rate for 9 teeth being 19 pounds, and Washington paid 6 pounds, so it's about a third. He's paying a third of the market rate.
well, it's just like how a slave life counts as a third of a white one for census purposes.
Well, and perhaps that's exactly the metric they were
logic?
using, right?
20 shillings per pound, actually, in the traditional
20.
system. So something like
We're 120 shillings.
it's under a third. Yeah.
So 120 divided by 9, we're talking about so 99 is
13 shillings.
118. So yeah, right. Whatever the rate, I mean, this is a thing that George Washington tooth scholars have to kind of, as we use this as a metaphor, a poetical metaphor for the founding of our nation and the role that slavery played. It's not like a binary relationship between freedom and enslavement. It's not a black and white issue,
As it were.
There is this additional element of this having been a commonplace enough practice, and one that there's a recognized rate of exchange, that this was at least a conversation that had to happen between the enslaved and the slaver.
For me, it's the small monstrosities like this that really help me understand slavery a little bit. It really makes it come alive off the page.
It does.
In a way that you don't get when you say, hey, this many million people were treated like property for this many centuries.
Yeah, if you picture a slave being held down and its teeth extracted his teeth extracted by a white master, it somehow is maybe more part of our modern conception of it than to say like, gather round and who wants to make 20 shillings today?
It definitely, if nothing else, it gives new meaning to the phrase indentured servant. And that concludes George Washington's Teeth. Entry 524.JB4114, certificate number 35120, in the omnibus. Futurelings, please do not judge us by the enlightened standards of your time as well. We have no idea what atrocities we are committing without knowing it, but certainly they are all happening on social media. We are at Omnibus Project on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, probably, all of the above. We are also, you can read my tweets at Ken Jennings. John is at John Roderick on Twitter and Instagram, and you should certainly subscribe to his OnlyFans. You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You can send us physical items. Please don't send us maybe send us your grandma's dentures. I don't know. Why do you have them?
Send your grandmother's fake teeth that are like at least half gold. Send us all of the gold fillings.
Are you going to go to a pawn shop with somebody else's grandma's teeth? Do people have two pair of dentures, or do people get buried with their dentures?
Boy, I don't know the answer. I have not been to enough funeral homes to have that discussion with them.
I believe my grandparents were buried with their dentures.
I imagine. Well, did they have open casket funerals?
And open-mouthed.
Yeah.
They were... Their lips had been pulled back in a terrible rictus so we could admire their even dentures.
If you are having an open casket funeral, I imagine that you have your dentures in. If you're being cremated, I imagine they leave your dentures out.
Oh, yeah, because you don't want them in the urn.
But that means that somewhere in the dumpster behind a funeral home is a bucket of dentures.
That's unpleasant to think about.
That's terrible.
The associations are all bad.
Yeesh.
Anyway, if you're
leave that thought. Leave that thought alone.
If you're an undertaker with a ton of dentures, send them to John Roderick, care of Omnibus Project, P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155.
You can send me some wind-up chattering teeth. Those are always fun.
Do you think? Well, that's what I was picturing when you said there were springs and mechanical bits.
It's not far from the truth, except that the
clackety-clack.
Novelty clacking teeth don't have any slave teeth or hippopotamus bones in them.
Usually. I mean, that's what I would use if I couldn't afford dentures. I would just go buy a pair of those novelty teeth and I'd just clackety-clack them into my mouth. Because that's what happens in cartoons, right?
Yeah. They fall out of your mouth and clack across the table.
You can congregate with other Omnibus listeners. Search for the word Futurelings on Facebook or Reddit or Discord to find those fan communities. Speaking of fans, speaking of supporters, speaking of people who are really willing to put their love of the Omnibus Project and belief in its ideals on the line.
Here they are.
Our Patreon supporters.
Let us lift them up and praise them.
They deserve really any praise we can offer, because without them, you would not be listening to any of this content right now. Like
Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna.
The generous support shown by Patreon donors is really the only reason Omnibus has continued in our independent era. Mm-hmm. And John and I are deeply grateful that because we have fun doing the show, that it's actually viable. Mm-hmm. And if you have been thinking that you might be a supporter, a potential supporter, look in the mirror. Look at yourself. Think, do I appreciate the Omnibus Project? Can I budgetarily justify supporting the show? If the answer to both of those questions is yes, why not do it? Why not go to patreon.com/Omnibus Project right now?
That's right. And
support the show. You'll get cool stuff and you'll feel special when we do this little bit in the outro every time.
Back before coronavirus, when we went to the movies, you would sometimes pay $12, $15 to go to the movies one time to see some garbage movie.
It's still the same way. Like if all those movies that didn't get released, like if I want to watch Onward on Disney Plus, I think it's $20.
Yeah, if you're sitting
For 2 hours.
regularly clicking through Amazon Prime and buying movies hither and thither for $9.95, and then you think, I listen to Omnibus twice a week.
It's a pretty
every
good deal.
week.
It's about 2 hours of content a week. Plus there's the bonus episode you get. So you're getting upwards of maybe around 10 hours of content.
10 hours of content?
John's shows are a little longer, but they generally have less content.
I don't know if the futurelings are going to get behind that statement. I think the futurelings are going to say, thank goodness the John shows are good, and they make up for Ken's bad shows.
10 hours a week of entertainment is pretty good. And if you can afford to toss us a few guineas,
20 shillings?
figure out what the going rate is and give us a third of it. And that's what George Washington would have wanted.
Hear, hear. Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. Perhaps your civilization outlasts ours. Ken and I may be buried in angry emails. Really, for every show we do, every show is going to make someone send us a letter that says, how dare you, sir?
But the last two were about feminism and slavery, so we're probably fine.
Yeah. No.
Nothing's going to happen about these last two from this week.
No, all of our listeners are MAGA Second Amendment supporters, so they're just cheering us on. They're like, Lilith, I was just talking to my friend about Lilith.
She's the worst.
Hey!
He's got a Lilith sucks tattoo.
We hope and pray that this catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. And hopefully that's not true. We'd like to end on a happier note.
Yeah, what if we end on the weird slavery show?
I don't think that's what was going to happen. I think we're going to come back next week, and I'm going to do something about 70s pop culture, and you're going to do some weird math show that nobody understands
Or likes.
and that will be our final word. And we hope to be back with you with both those entries soon in the Omnibus.